Okay, James Woods, James Woods, James Wood. Yeah. Well, I've watched the recently released Blu-ray edition of John Badham's The Hard Way, starring Michael J. Fox and James Woods, and I've also skimmed through the second edition of John Badham on Directing, and no, there doesn't seem to be anything in here to explain what the hell happened with Mr. Woods. But that's okay because, well, okay, play acting aside. I've actually read the book. I haven't just skimmed through it. And it is short on gossip, frankly, but it is an interesting collection of practical and spiritual advice for up-and-coming filmmakers, and also for people who just want some good insight on how one approaches directing from the mouth of John Badham and a number of his colleagues as well. This is a good book. And we are going to be talking about it in the interview with John Badham. So, without further ado, here's the man who brought you Saturday Night Fever and Short Circuit and War Games and Blue Thunder and many, many more, and who has subsequently moved quite significantly into television directing as well. Here is my interview with John Badham.
Trainer's got me a Nautilus and the Stairmaster, so you don't have to worry about Nick Lang.
He doesn't belong here. He belongs in Never Never Land.
And you're never gonna believe where I am. I'm in a ghetto.
He's told me face to face that he wants to be me. It's my life.
It's my life.
John, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm just doing great. Everything considered, I can't complain.
Okay, that's cool. That's cool. It's about the same here. I wanted to start by actually giving you an apology. Back in 1977, when I was a Dewey youth, I was among the Disco Sucks contingent. And so
Yes.
yeah, I did go and see Saturday Night Fever, and I took a dim view of it then. And I think something like about 20 years later, I said to myself, well, I keep hearing that it's a really good film. So I watched it again. And yes, I can see there was more to it than I saw initially.
Well, thank you. You're completely forgiven. It's all right. There were
I'm not.
lots of people.
You're more gracious than I probably deserve. I did want to ask you, when you were in the middle of it, was there a part of you that wanted to grab people and go, "You're not getting it"?
Well, no, actually, everybody around me that was involved in the making of the picture was totally into it. And I mean, we thought it was a little movie. It was only like a $2 million movie. So we didn't think too much of it, that it was going to be fine and, and people would like it, but we never thought that it was going to be a big hit. And so we were getting, on the one hand, great favorable press, and then we would get, feedback like you described from the Never Disco bunch. And wasn't there a big celebration in one of the ballparks, like in Chicago or something, where they burned all kinds of albums? They burned disco albums all over the place.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, it's like the bonfire of the vanities.
I think Vanity was a protege of Prince, actually, so it wouldn't have been that.
Yes, okay.
I want to ask you about something, and this may be tangential, and it may be not even something that's really an issue, but I only discovered this, like that this was a thing a few months ago, and I wanted to get your opinion on it. I found out that there is actually rather strong feelings going around cinematographers as far as panning versus tracking. Have you ever heard? You must have heard this.
I didn't know there was a thing about it. I mean, there's a big difference between the two in the type of motion that's created, and uh, and different considerations about how hard it is. It's harder to set up a tracking shot than a panning shot, because the panning shot can just be on a tripod and just is in one place and easy to do. And a tracking shot probably requires, a much smoother motion. But I don't know what's the nature of the argument.
That's actually what I wanted to ask you about. What I had heard was that there are directors who say that they have meetings with cinematographers, and one of the first things they ask is, "Tell me you're not going to ask me to pan."
Oh, well, I don't know. These are just little bugaboos. I recently, as of like 2 days ago, was shown a clip from Saturday Night Fever that had John Travolta and his girlfriend getting out of a car right beside the Verrazano Bridge. And all you could see was Travolta and his girlfriend and the car. And they walked toward us, and we pan with them. And then as they go past us, we start revealing this enormous Verrazano Bridge. And it's such a simple shot, but what a great reveal. This is what they're coming toward, and that part of that shot remained for the rest of the scene. And I remember thinking the other day when I saw it, gee, I've forgotten how effective a pan shot can be as a reveal of where somebody is going, as opposed to a car coming by where you zoom like that, which is much, much simpler. So yeah, no, I had never heard of that particular pet peeve.
Done right, a pan can actually like open up a world.
Right. Yeah, you can watch something develop in front of your eyes in an interesting way. That's very subtle and very organic. The shot I just described, you're not aware so much of the camera move as you're following, the characters, and then are kind of taken into a new world. So it's not an arbitrary pan. I mean, there are examples, for example, of two people talking together, and camera is on one, and when they finish talking and the other person starts talking, it pans over to the other person, and that's really annoying. I mean, sometimes it can work, but sometimes some people will insist on then panning back to the first person and doing it again, and then you really want to strangle the director.
How would you have set up that shot if that fell to you?
Well, you can do it once if it's right for the scene, and I'm thinking of a particular Spielberg show that I saw, a pilot he did for television back in the early 70s, and he has a conflict between two characters, and he's on one character throwing out an insult to the other character, and the camera pans with it, and you get the character's reaction in the same shot, and that was very effective. But he just did it that one time, and it was organic to the scene. He didn't try to make a thing out of it.
That wasn't Spielberg's segment of Night Gallery, was it?
No, this is after, and Martin Landau was the star of the series. I don't think it ever went to series, but it was a very good pilot, and I have used part of it in my class on moving camera.
Oh, I don't think I've heard of a Spielberg. I don't think I've heard of a Spielberg pilot post Jaws that didn't go to series for one thing.
Oh, well, this was before Jaws. This is, I'd say, 72, 73, around in there. Martin Landau starred in it. And as I say, I forget the name of the of the pilot.
So the reason why we're talking is that you've come up with the second edition of your book, and I'm checking the title now, John Badham on Directing.
Okay.
That's it. I got that one right. So, you know, I've read it a couple of times now, and granted that you are teaching at a college there, but the thing that strikes me about the book in general is that it feels like the stuff they don't tell you at film school. Was that sort of your intent with the book?
Well, yes. My original intent started at the American Film Academy at AFI, and teaching a class there. And in a question and answer session, somebody said, "What do you do when actors don't do what you tell them to do?" And I thought, well, that's an interesting question. But I noticed simultaneously that the entire class of 50 or 60 people sat up on the alert that they wanted to, hear that. And it occurred to me that I should be telling them the things they don't teach you in film school, that, you stumble upon, by accident or later. And that there was definitely a lot to be talked about, especially forming a bond with your actors. Our young directors are very good with all the mechanical parts of the filmmaking, and cameras and microphones and lights and all that stuff. They know that stuff cold. But when it comes down to dealing with human beings, oh no,
Yeah.
they're annoying, weird people. Actors are weird. They come in wanting to be a fried egg, or Marlon Brando wanting to be a giant tomato in Superman.
That's true. And that is the thing that strikes me just in general, is that the book, for a good chunk of it, seems to be about how to deal with human beings, which isn't
Right.
typically focused on in the schools.
No, it's not, and that's why the book is there, because it's a whole lifetime getting good at dealing with human beings, unless you have a wonderful grasp of human communication. But learning some very simple techniques, can teach you how to respect the actor better and how to get their cooperation coming back. So it's not just about being Mr. Nice Guy. It's about you get a better performance. That's the whole thing. I mean, you can hate actors and be horrible and nasty, but if you're sweet to them, you'll get a good performance. And that's worth it. That's worth the trouble.
And that's the other interesting thing to me, is how you're regarding the actors here, which is not oppositional, but it is regarding them as perhaps coming from another place than the director needs to come. Am I framing that right?
They are actually your creative partners. Used properly, worked with properly, you're getting ideas from them. They're bringing things to the party. You're asking their cooperation in staging the scenes, the blocking, what emotional life they bring to it. This is all that good actor training, and you want to make their life on the set with you working where they feel free to bring all of that, where they're not feeling like they're going to get yelled at, which is what Anne Bancroft told me once. I said, "What do you want from a director?" "I want him to leave me alone until I have a chance to show him what I brought to the set before I get yelled at."
Mm-hmm. Do you ever do line readings for your actors?
Okay. Bite your tongue, yes. No, No, it's there's a way to do it, to talk to the actor about what's the purpose of this line, what's their goal in saying the line, but to give them a line reading gives you a mechanical repetition. They'll imitate you, but there's a reason why you're on one side of the camera and they're on the other side of the camera. They'll give you a mechanical interpretation, but they resent it. It's kind of insulting to them. Whereas if you say, well, what if you're trying to seduce this person or persuade them to lend you some money, and let the line reading come out of that, so they know what the purpose of the line is, because that usually straightens it out, where the emphasis has been on the wrong word or the wrong phrase, or there's no life in it at all. If you give them a purpose, then usually that straightens itself right out.
Now, one of the things that's new in the second edition is that you've added a new section on directing for television, and in recent years you've been very busy in that area. And when I heard about this, and before I had read the book, I was getting a little concerned about how I was going to approach you on this, because my observation is I wouldn't say I'm orthodox auteurist, but I get close to that. And my realization is that operating under television, it's a very different dynamic. And I was concerned, given that you're coming from feature film and the power there, I was concerned about raising this issue with you. And then I read the book, and you pretty much bring it up yourself. So, can you explain what the director is on a TV show that makes it different from when you're directing a feature film?
Usually feature films, and let's not include franchise films, mm-hmm. Mission Impossible, Superman, all the different comic book things. That's a different bear altogether, kind of like a very expensive television show. And so in a movie, almost name almost any movie that doesn't become a franchise, the director is very much toward the top of the food chain about how things are going to look, and making the decision. And you pick a director who's a strong enough leader to create this whole new world of that movie. And so if they're not number one at the top of the food chain, they're number 2 or 3 in terms of final decisions on the casting, on how everything gets shot. So that's one side. Now we go over to the other extreme, which is, say, an episode of NCIS. Now, NCIS is a brand. Like, most television series, they're brands, and they've been thought up by somebody else, developed by somebody else. A director has come in and done a pilot where he's very involved in the creation of it, but now as a running week-to-week show, your job as a director is to come in and help recreate that brand or follow the guidelines of the overall shape of it. And at the same time, they want you to bring something to the party. They want you to bring some ideas. They're not just saying you have to create a complete clone, because they want freshness, but it's a freshness that they know when they see it. So you may come in, you may have half a dozen great ideas, but only a couple of them work for them. And you have to learn early on in directing television that not to be too precious about it. If your ideas aren't accepted, just store them away. You'll use them later. Hitchcock did that for decades. He'd store ideas away that didn't quite work, but then he'd pull it out in The Man Who Knew Too Much, or he'd pull it out in Psycho, and you know, an idea that he had 25 years before. So actually now, as a television director, instead of being number 2 or 3 in the food chain, you might be number 14 or 15. You're like in a Kafka novel where the levels of bureaucracy above you are so dense and so impenetrable that you never know who really has the final cut. It goes from you to 2 or 3 sets of producers, to the studio, to the network, and what comes out, you know, may, if you're lucky, bear some resemblance to what you had in mind when you directed it. But that's just a reality of, if you're going to go into that kind of business, you have to know that that's the way it's going to operate, and you do your best to be creative and bring things to the party. You can't lay down and whine and moan about it, because that doesn't do any good. And know that you're just not, you're not the 600-pound gorilla in the room, and get over that quickly, because suddenly you'll find you're unemployable.
So if you're not the 600-pound gorilla, and you're not the guy who's just saying, put the camera over there, what do you bring to a TV episode or a TV show?
Well, you bring an ability to work with the actors. The actors, especially in television shows, have a lot to say about who they work with and who they won't work with. And if you go in and irritate one of the lead actors, that's the last they'll ever see of you. So you have to, you know, be good at that. You have to have a good visual sense, and not to mention little things like staying on schedule and staying on budget, which are extremely important, because the budgets are limited. They're big, but they're limited. So trying to bring interesting, fun ideas for the actors to do, interesting business for them, interesting, fun camera angles that are fresh and see things in a new way. These are things that that the director is more visually minded may bring to it, and see things in it that the writers did not see. But at the same time, you're trying to get everything that the writers did see, because they want it that way. They don't want you changing dialogue, or if you do change dialogue, you better have it the way they wrote it too, because they spent a lot of time thinking of that particular line of dialogue, and get mighty irritated if you go saying, well, how about if we said it this way?
That's interesting, because one of the things I think you emphasize in the book is the importance of coverage. And actually, it sounds to me, the way you frame it, that it's actually more important in television than it is maybe even in feature films.
Oh yeah, watch a Steven Soderbergh movie, just off the top of my head. And Steven loves to shoot things without coverage. I mean, he very carefully stages them. They're not just willy-nilly staged, but the emphasis is where he believes it should be. Well, the average television producer wants the ability to put the emphasis where they think it should be. They want to make sure that they get the emotional reactions. So they're asking for way more coverage than I might ordinarily give them. And I give them what I think they need. And luckily, so far, my guesses are, you know, pretty good. But if you undercover, then they get angry at you. No, I need to see what Bill thought about this moment. I need to see, you know, such and such. So that you become, if you fold into their way of thinking, you're just shooting sort of newsreel footage. Get everything you can possibly see and let them put it together. And that's a very common kind of request.
You know, you talk in your book, you actually tell an anecdote about your work on an episode of The Shield, and we won't go into that. But I will ask you, coming from being the big boss on a feature film to realizing that you're part of the team on a TV show, how long did it take you to reconcile with that change?
Well, I just had to break some old habits,
Hmm.
uh, and you know, kind of slap myself in the face and remind myself that it's their product. They're the ones who invented it, and they're the ones who are trying to keep it going. I'm here for 3 weeks and gone. So, I have to respect them, but just uh, it was a little bit of culture shock, and I should have known better, and you know, restrain myself a little bit. But old habits, I guess, die hard, as they say.
Well, they did. You must have gotten over them because you've worked a lot in TV in the past few years.
I hope so. I hope I have. Um, I enjoy working with the cast, and I enjoy having the writer on the set with me, as somebody I can look over my shoulder and say, "How was that? Was that okay? You think that's all right? Did we miss anything?" Because I'm happy to take input from people. I don't want to be precious about it.
You touched on this earlier, but I did want to look into this a little more because we've been separating out feature films from television, but there is now this thing that I guess can be lumped into the category of the franchise film. And I think the model for what I'm thinking of is what Disney has been doing with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where you can bring in different directors, but if you watch from film to film to film, stylistically, visually, there's very little that you can distinguish from one director to another um, in those films. So um, is this a situation of 'twas ever thus, or is the idea of the auteur, if not being ushered out, at least being morphed?
Well, definitely in terms of the franchise film, it, it, there's you have to be really careful what you can bring to it as a director. I mean, you're hardly the auteur, when you're starting with something that they've made already 4 or 5 variations of, and the characters are very well defined. So uh, it's you're trying to fit into the continuity of things. Now, we did see in early Bond pictures, for example, a change when we went from Sean Connery to, well, let's say Roger Moore. The tone of the Bond pictures changed a lot. The tone of the Harry Potter pictures changed a lot as they went from Chris Columbus into later directors who brought a darker view of how it was. But um, I think that if the producers had not liked the direction that those directors were going in, they would have pulled them up short, or even, God forbid, changed the director altogether, which has happened in these franchise pictures, where the director takes the film off in a direction that the producers don't want to go, and so they cut it off short, and rather than try to deal with it after the fact, they get somebody in who's going to keep it the way they want it to be.
In a lot of these franchise films now, what a lot of studios have been doing is approaching directors who have caught attention for their smaller films and bringing them in to these franchise projects. And is there any word of caution that you'd want to give to these people in making the transition from one to the other?
Well, I don't know. It's a great opportunity for them. The producers are looking for somebody who's got some fresh ideas, not some same old. And so they're thinking, oh, here's Patty Jenkins, who did Monster, a very small film, but let's give her Wonder Woman. Well, there's a lot of thinking there. Gee, is she experienced enough to do Wonder Woman? Well, of course she is, and brilliant director. But I'm thinking, well, let's have a woman director. Here's somebody who did something amazing with actors' performances in Monster. We can help her with the action parts of it. I'm trying to think aloud. What might those producers have been thinking when they asked Patty to do it? And somebody joked once, well, they're cheaper, which just gets producers irritated because they're less expensive than somebody more established, but the difference is relatively peanuts. Mm-hmm. When they go out and they spend $25 million for a star, to argue over a few $100,000 on a director is silly. So it's not about saving money. It's probably about not only a freshness, but maybe there's an element of pliability in there, hoping that, we'll have somebody who, will listen to us and won't come in and try to take over everything and run roughshod over the whole thing. I worked on a television series a couple of years ago that had a director / producer, which is on almost all television shows now have this job of somebody who's really a director, but their job is to be there every day to kind of oversee the directing tone of the whole movie, of the whole episode. And starting a new season, they brought in a new director producer who took the bit in his teeth and started to run in a different direction with the series. And within a few weeks, they replaced him and with another director producer because it was going off track. Mm. And they said, well, thank you. These are interesting ideas, but this is not the way we want our show to go. And so they made a change.
I will tell you one of the things that kind of sticks in my craw about the franchise films are, and it doesn't happen with the better of them, but there are these films where you get to the last reel and you get this distinct feeling that the director said, okay, I wash my hands of this. It's in the hands of the special effects people. Do what you got to do.
Yes.
Should I get over that, or is that a real concern?
Well, if it starts to feel fake and the legitimacy of the story has gone out the window in favor of a lot of weird effects there that they think is going to make for a big bang of an ending for the movie. I know that feeling. I remember, I think the first time I was really conscious of it was The Witches of Eastwick, where, it got to the end and it seemed like a lot of not very good special effects strung together. And George Miller, who's a wonderful director, just kind of took all the heat for that.
We are in strange and tenuous times right now. The Regal Theater chain is pretty much shuttered. AMC is on the bubble. And there is a serious question now of whether mainstream theatrical presentation is going to survive even into 2021. And to a certain extent, and I'll maybe elaborate on this further, to a certain extent, I'm wondering if that is completely a bad idea, at least as far as these giant chains are concerned, or if, in sort of seeing the mainstream tentpole films going completely to video, the theatrical filmmaking experience could be changed into something smaller and more ambitious and more daring and more experimental. Have you given any thought to this, and where do you think we're going?
Well, certainly, I mean, there's obviously a huge economic factor for these theater chains trying to keep themselves alive, even though they're kind of in hibernation at this point, and AMC, running out of cash, and Regal not able to keep themselves going, and they're just hoping that things will settle down enough so that when you do have the tentpole pictures, the ones that are being held, the new Bond pictures, the Spielberg's West Side's new version of West Side Story, people, I firmly believe, like a social experience of getting out of the house and getting away from the television. And though you can see, nowadays a lot of films like the Borat film or Spike Lee's most recent film coming on Netflix and Amazon Prime, the younger audiences like to get out of the house. The older audiences for years have been pretty much staying home. And so it's the family films that the kids can go to that, work in the theaters, and things that appeal to a younger demographic that I firmly believe will come back slowly. Everybody, if you tell me tomorrow that I can finally go and see Tenet, which I've been wanting to see, I'm going to take a chance and go out there and see that picture. Even if there's only 25 people in the theater spread out all over the place.
I just want to ask you one more thing, which I was thinking about your entire oeuvre, and I realized just last night, were you aware that the finale of Santa Claus the movie rips off the finale of Blue Thunder?
No.
Have you seen the film?
No, Santa Claus the movie. Oh,
Santa
no,
Claus.
okay.
I swear they are going, well, we've got to flip the sleigh. No, you can't flip the sleigh.
Oh my gosh. Oh, okay. That's very funny. Oh goodness. Well, flattery. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery.
Yeah. It's probably the best they could do at that point. So yeah.
Right. Oh my God. I'm gonna have to check that out.
Maybe not.
No,
maybe not.
Don't do it.
No.
It's a friend of mine said when there was a musical version of Saturday Night Fever on Broadway, and I came into New York, and I said, oh, I was thinking I would drop down and see that. And he said, I don't think you should. It'll just make you mad.
That was interesting because, now that you've raised that, that was one of the things I was curious about, was that at the time, 1977, Saturday Night Fever was cited as a musical, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, I mean, I've always thought of it as a musical.
Yeah.
From the day I first read the script, I said, this is a musical in a modern form, where we're not singing the lyrics. Nobody is singing it, but it's definitely being driven, by these musical ideas and the idea of dance and how that works. It doesn't have to be about song. There are song and dance movies. So this should qualify. We actually ran the movie in its earliest format as we were cutting without any of the musical numbers. And it was a nice kind of mean streets little film, maybe only like an hour and a quarter long. And when you added the musical numbers, it raised it up to a whole different level, so that often people forget that little mean streets story that's at the basis of it. When you go back and you look at it later, you go, oh my God, this movie is really dark.
Yeah. And
it's not just all about dancing.
And that's what I discovered in rewatching it, and I was grateful I could see it at least the second time around. It is a really, really good film, and it's because you go beyond the romance of disco.
Oh well, I was caused to relook at the script the other day, which I have not done in forever, and I'm just caught up in how wonderfully Norman Wexler wrote it, with such detail and such depth of layers of feeling among all of the Travolta and his gang and their kind of inherent racism and sexism that's built into things, and some of it very, very politically incorrect. So much so that I even get a little squirmy about it now, saying, "Oh my God, this is so racist! I can't believe it." Oh, but that was the life we were portraying, and we were treating it like a documentary, and getting our inspiration, as Norman did, from the way people actually behaved in those neighborhoods.
And that's what makes it special. That's why people are still exalting this and looking somewhat askance at something like Can't Stop the Music.
Yeah. I mean, they're different. There were a lot of Saturday Night Fever-like films that came out afterwards. Thank God It's Friday being one that pops in my head. And they needed more than just a lot of cool music.
Yeah.
They needed characters and well, it was just characters, not stories so much, because Saturday Night Fever doesn't have much of a story, but it does have, very strong characters.
And thank you for that. And thank you for taking all this time to talk with me. Really appreciate it.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
So The Hard Way is available now. And John Badham on Directing, 2nd edition, is available as well right now. Go ahead and buy them immediately. No time to lose. Except, before you do that, like this video. And also, if you like what I'm doing, subscribe to my channel, because I need it. I need warm bodies. Thank you for watching. Take care. Be well.